Okay, we should start. So, good morning, guys, and welcome on my presentation. My name is Tomasz. I came to you from Wrocław today, but actually I've spent 10 years of my life in Kraków, so it feels a little bit like coming back home to visit Kraków again. Welcome to my presentation. Today the topic of the presentation is 7 deadlier sins of quality. Why deadlier? Is it actually an English word? Good question. Because there are 7 deadly sins, obviously, in the Bible. So why deadlier sins? I will explain it to you just in a few minutes. So what I do on an everyday basis I work as a manager, which sounds pretty bad because no one likes managers, right? And I run my own training company. But I don't want to talk about myself, I want to show you some presentation. However, as I said, I'm a manager, so if you're expecting some technical stuff, unfortunately, no. We'll be talking a lot about psychology, a lot about our behaviors in our work on our everyday basis, and see how can we improve our behavior to actually be more effective. So, first of all, I don't want this to be an ordinary, boring presentation. I want today to play a game. And those of you who are fans of horror movies, you probably recognize this quote, right? I want to play a game, like the Saw movie. And the game that was in that movie wasn't fun at all, right? There was like blood, flush, guts flying everywhere. So I don't want to play anything like this. I want to play something much more pleasant, much more nice, and something that we will all enjoy. And I want to play a game, and today we go retro. We go to retro games, we go to the 80s, we go to the pixels. We'll have a lot of pixels art in here, and we're going back to the 80s. I don't know if calling 80s the retro as a retro is not very fair, because I guess I'm from the 80s. Probably looking at you, most of you are also from the 80s. But in terms of computer games, yeah, 80s are definitely retro. So, today we go retro, and one thing is we're going to play a game. The second thing is that why we are going to the 80s? Well, because when I do presentations, I always want to have this main theme. And I get inspired a lot by books, movies, TV series. So I want to go to the 80s, but not only as a game, but also with our main theme. And here is the answer for the question, why deadlier sins and not deadly sins? Because of that. One of my favorite TV shows, Stranger Things. So not deadly sins, but deadlier sins. 7 deadlier sins of craftsmanship. So we are going back to the 80s together with Stranger Things crew. We're going back to play a game, and our main theme will be the Stranger Things world and the Stranger Things characters. So if you've seen Stranger Things, that's great. If not, no worries, nothing happens. So, let's meet our team, because in our game we'll have a team, we'll have an adventure, we'll be going through different chapters and meeting different characters, and we'll be trying to learn from these characters, right? Okay, so just like in Stranger Things, there was crew of 4 people, so today we have as well crew of 4 guys in here. So let's meet our team. The first one is Lucas. Let's give Lucas a role, right? L stands for not loser. L for leader, obviously. So Lucas is the leader. Then we have Mike. M stands for the one we hate, managers. So Mike is the manager. Then we have 11. E stands for, that would be too easy, engineer. 11 will be our end user. And last but not least, we have Dustin, and D obviously stands for developer. So Dustin is the developer, and Dustin today is the most important person, because from his perspective, we'll be looking at the characters we are going to meet throughout our journey, and in looking through Dustin's eyes, we'll be trying to learn how can we improve our behaviors at work as software developers, right? So, in our game we'll have 8 chapters. We will have 1 chapter per each deadly sin. We'll meet a character that represents this deadly sin, and we'll try to learn something, how this sin affects our behavior, and what are the consequences. And in the last chapter, we'll try to learn how can we actually improve. Okay, so if you guys are ready, I guess we can start our adventure. So, chapter number 1. Chapter number 1 is pride. In every chapter, as I said, we'll be meeting a character that is a very good example of that particular sin. By the way, if you played Pokemon, you probably recognize this style, right? Okay, so who can we meet in here? Who can we meet in this chapter? Who is a very good example from the world of TV series, books, movies? Who is a very good example of pride, of too much confidence, even being cocky? Who can be a great example in here? Who can we meet in here? Any ideas? Any ideas? No ideas? Okay, so I'll tell you. Here we meet Sheldon Cooper. So Sheldon Cooper appears. Bazinga! This guy was really confident, right? This guy thought he knows everything. He thought he knows it all. And probably this meme is a very good example of that, right? He was thinking like, my brain is better than everybody's. He thought he knows it all. Well, but actually, if you watch the TV series, if you haven't, it's actually no surprise. Well, it wasn't always right. Right? He had this moment that he was surprised that something is different than he thought. Something is not as he knows it. So there was this like, say what moments? Yeah? Say what? I'm not right? It's impossible. I know everything. My knowledge. I know things. And I wanted to share one quote with you in this moment, at this moment. And the quote is, the greatest enemy of knowledge is not ignorance. It's the illusion of knowledge. Do you know who said that? You probably know this guy. You for sure know this guy. This is Stephen Hawking's quote, who unfortunately last year passed away. But if you look at this quote, you can see that it's really, really how wise it is. Right? The greatest enemy of knowledge is not ignorance. Because if you're an ignorant, you don't have the knowledge and you don't care, that's okay. Because you won't make any decisions based on false assumptions. The greatest enemy of knowledge is the illusion of knowledge. And actually in psychology, illusion of knowledge and illusion of experience are two psychological biases that affect how our brain works. We, as human beings, we tend to treat our knowledge and treat our experience as something sure. We are confident that our knowledge and our experience are there and this is the right thing. Unfortunately, that's not always true. Sometimes we may be affected by this illusion of knowledge when we think we know something, but it's not true. And so the learning from this chapter is that your ideas, the ideas you have in your work, may be based on opinions. Because your knowledge, your experience is nothing more than opinion. It's not a fact. So this is the learning here. You can make decisions. You can take actions. When you think this is based on knowledge, on experience, it is based on facts, on data, but it's actually not. You can make your decisions on opinions, on gut feelings, however you call it. And you can therefore make bad decisions. Chapter number 1 is done. So let's go to chapter number 2. Chapter number 2 is greed. Who can be a really good example of greed in this case? Again, from world of TV series, books, any ideas? Who was really, really greedy? Ideas? I hear it often, but I thought about someone else. From The Simpsons, one of my favorite cartoons, Mr. Burns. Like, Mr. Burns is excellent guy. This was a great example of a manager, right? The stereotypical manager who wants to take all your money and drain your blood, right? He was using his employees to the very last moment to get all the money, right? So this is what he was interested about, right? He was interested in gold. He wanted all this for himself. But I don't want to talk about money in here because one, it's like a very big topic for absolutely another presentation. And second thing is that I don't really want to. I want to talk about something a bit different because money is one thing, but there are these treasures, right? We have these small treasures in our IT world, in our projects. There are these things we love, right? It can be, I don't know, some greenfield project, or it can be doing some work with a brand new framework so you can put it into your project as something new, experiment with the technology, put it into your CV. Or maybe this can be, I don't know, a demo for a customer or something that, like increase your visibility. So there are these tasks, these things we do at work that we love. And we like when we are doing this, we feel like a kid in the candy store. Yeah, this is it. The thing is that we want to we become greedy. We take these things to ourselves. And there's another problem because I hope this picture may help you a little bit, because I wanted to talk about the cheerleader effect. Cheerleader effect, probably some of you, like, I've heard something like, and yeah, that's a good thing, right? It's like, cheerleader effect? That's not a proper theory. This is some theory from one of the TV series, right? So it's not that. Well, actually, cheerleader effect is a valid psychological effect. It was proven that in some environments it works. And in general, what is this cheerleader effect? Cheerleader effect says that in a group, we seem more attractive than on our own. More attractive, I mean physically attractive. But I don't want to talk in here about attractiveness. I don't want to talk about who's nice, who's pretty, and who's not. I want to talk about something else. And this will be cheerleader effect, not from psychology, but only from my experience, not backed up with any research at all. Just my experience and my observations. What I want to change in this, I want to say that cheerleader effect in IT works more or less like that not in a group we seem more attractive, but in a group we in general seem more awesome. Because, guys, we are not in the Wild West anymore in IT. We are not doing projects on our own. It's not like, I don't know, decades ago when there was a single developer who was sitting down in his basement writing 50,000 lines of code that no one understood, and this was software. No. Right now we work in the teams. We work collaboratively. We have to collaborate with each other. So, in a group, we seem more attractive because, guys, if you have a good idea, you want to achieve something, and you try to do it, well, it's much easier if you build a buy-in from the people you work with, from your other peers, your colleagues, developers, your business, your stakeholders, your, I don't know, whoever is there, testers, managers, UX, data guys, whoever is there. If you are able to build a buy-in for your idea, there's like a much bigger chance that you will actually achieve this. And if you take all this stuff for yourself, you will do all the things alone and you won't achieve all you want. And this is the learning from this chapter. On your own, you may not achieve all you want. Plus, if you take all the cool stuff for yourself, no one will like you and you can end up forever alone. Sorry. So, chapter number 2 is done, so let's go to chapter number 3. Chapter number 3 is lust. Who will be, again, a very good example, a great example of lust? Someone lustful. Someone who was really willing to pick up all the girls. Any ideas? Obviously, thank you very much. Here we meet Barney Stinson. So Barney Stinson, who is absolutely awesome. This guy was awesome and he wanted everything, right? He wanted to pick up all the girls. He wanted all the best suits. He wanted money. He wanted fame. He wanted popularity. He wanted everything. He wanted everything. But if you've seen How I Met Your Mother, this character is from How I Met Your Mother TV series. If you've seen it, well, there was an obvious question. Why he wanted all that? Because if you think about it, if you've seen the TV show, at the end it turned out, surprise, surprise, that he was looking for a true love. If you haven't seen the show, it's quite obvious, right? That there's a guy who wants to have everything, but he's looking for true love. Surprise, surprise. Yep. So why he wanted all this? The answer is very simple. He saw other people, other men, who were picking up the girls, who were wearing the best suits, who were having money, having fame, and they seemed happy. So what he thought? Well, he thought if he does exactly the same things, then he will be happy as well. And this, in psychology, is called the cargo cult. I don't know if you've heard about it. Who heard about cargo cult? Well, less than half. So let me briefly explain it, because when I for the first time heard about this psychological phenomena, I was like shocked. How can this work? It's like impossible. So to explain you the cargo cult, we have to go back to the World War II when Americans were fighting Japanese on the Pacific Ocean. So Americans were creating, obviously, their bases on the small islands on the Pacific so they can fight Japanese. So they were going there, building their, I don't know, like runways for planes to take off and land, their like flight control towers and so on and so on. And obviously, on these islands, there were some people living, like these wild tribes who never seen any civilization. So Americans decided they need to build some kind of relation with them, right? Well, once it's useful, second, they won't get eaten, so they needed to establish some relationship. So they started to give these wild tribes some gifts, right? To just make friends with them. And if you look at that situation from this wild guy's perspective, who were living on the island for centuries and never seen any civilization, there are people coming from the sky and giving us gifts. Well, they are gods. If you want to have a definition of God, yeah, this is guy from the sky who gives us something, yeah? God, perfect. So Americans became gods. But then the war was over, and Americans flew back home. And these poor people, these poor white people, thought, we have done something wrong. The gods are angry, they are not coming anymore, we need to do something because we want more gifts. So they started to mimic whatever Americans were doing, hoping to get these planes back, get Americans to come back to them. So they started to build runways, flight control towers, and everything from all the materials they could find. So sticks, clay, I don't know what else. So bamboos and stuff like this. They were building planes from sticks, as you can see in here. And if you look at this from our civilized perspective, it looks so silly, right? Oh, you poor wildmans, you have no idea how the planes work. You're building planes from sticks. This is so funny, right? When we look at that, it seems funny. But do you see that very often we are doing the same things at our work, at our projects, right? Netflix is doing microservices. Let's do microservices. Spotify has their chapters, guilds, tribes. Let's do that. These guys are going on cloud. We have to have a cloud, right? We're mimicking things we see in other companies and hope to achieve the same result. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong at looking at big players and looking at what they do, because they are setting trends like Google, Spotify, Netflix, and so on. These big players, they set trends in the IT in the entire world. But you know what? They do these things for a reason. There is a big reason why they start doing those things, like, I don't know, going microservices, going serverless, whatever there is. If you want to achieve the same results, you need to understand if this is going to work in your environment as well. If you are just going to mimic the same practices and put them in your project, you may not achieve the same result, right? You want to build a big, shiny jumbo jet, and you end up with a plane from sticks. So the learning here is that you may introduce new things to your project, tools, frameworks, processes, whatever there is, just because others do. And you hope to achieve the same result, but it's not happening. Chapter number 3 is done, so let's go to chapter number 4. Chapter number 4 is envy. Envy/jealousy. Who can be a very good example? Who can we meet in here again? Who was a little mean, jealous son of a son? Who can we meet in here? Any ideas? Who will be a good example of envy, of jealousy? Any ideas? I don't hear nothing, so I will tell you again. So here we meet a little mean Eric Cartman. So Eric Cartman appears, screw you guys, right? So this guy was really mean, right? This guy was jealous, this guy was envy. Well, he hated when anyone was happier, if anyone was better, or actually whatever. He had to be the best, he had to be the coolest, he had to have his plans, his ideas being done. He wanted to be on top, right? And not only he wanted to be on top, but he was actually enjoying someone else's failures, right? This, again, here, this meme is the proof, right? Your tears are so yummy and sweet. I enjoy your failure. And you know, guys, we are of course professional. We are in IT, serious business, serious companies, so we don't behave like that, right? Or do we? Because if you would translate this, your tears are so yummy and sweet, into our IT language, wouldn't it be something like, here, your tears are yummy and your tears are yummy and sweet in IT. I told you so. Right? We are professionals. We don't enjoy when other people fail. But come on, this I told you so. Well, I told you that this wouldn't be working, but you just kept doing it. I told you so. Here the poker face, right? No emotions, but inside, fire, right? We love to prove people wrong, and then it's just like, I told you so. I'm supporting you right now. So we are adults, but it sometimes happens. So, and especially these behaviors kind of come into play when the discussion starts. When we have a discussion, when we have some conflict of opinions, this is when our little Eric Cartman comes into play, right? Because we are adults, as I said, we are professionals, but when the discussion starts, usually the discussion looks like I'm right and you're wrong. And if you want to discuss, we can talk about how wrong you are, and that's it. So this is right. This is our professional behavior. So another cognitive bias comes into play in here, which kind of affects the way we handle conflicts of opinion. And this is something called the confirmation bias. I don't know if you've heard about the confirmation bias. In general, this thing is that we look for arguments that support our vision, and we give them greater value. So in general, we look for stuff that we agree with or agrees with us. And to give you a very brief example of how it works, obviously a little exaggerated, let's have a little conflict in here, right? Okay, so I say, for example, let's go to production without testing. And I will ask you, sorry, you stood in the front row, so you're like easy target. So, do you think we should go to production without testing?
Sometimes.
Are you happy to tell where you work?
No, I will not tell you where.
But what about this testing without going to production without testing? You keep this sometimes, or?
I've done it years ago. Yeah, I won't do it again, but it works sometimes.
Too weak for conflict. For a real conflict, it's too weak. Excuse me, I'll ask you. Should we go to production without testing?
I think no.
No. Okay, so see, we have different opinions. We have a conflict. So what we do? We ask for the third opinion, right? We go to someone to tell us what to do. So I'll ask your colleague. Should we go to production without testing? No. You're rather a junior, right? Yeah? Okay, we'll ask someone else. I'll ask you. Should we go to production without testing?
It depends.
Not enough for me. Again, junior. I'll ask you. Should we go to production without testing?
Should I
Say yes.
Yes.
That's the senior. This guy is the architect, right? And this is confirmation bias in practice. We'll be looking. This is how our brain works. If someone doesn't agree with me, I will give him lower value. My brain will say, okay, this guy is not right. He doesn't agree with me, so definitely there's something wrong with him. He agrees with me. That's my guy. His arguments are valid. He has great value. He's, bam, perfect. And this is how it works. Obviously exaggerated, but you have to be aware that this is how these things in our head work. So, learning from here is that you may ignore the best idea, you may ignore the best solution, only because it's not yours. You can fight for a solution that is worse to support your own idea, looking for arguments that will support your idea. Chapter number 5, gluttony. Gluttony meaning eating and drinking way too much. Who can we meet in here? Any ideas? Example of a really big guy. Big family guy. Peter Griffin appears. So Peter Griffin is obviously saying that he's not fat. However, in one of the episodes, it was proven that he has his own gravitational field. But he's not fat, right? Gluttony. Gluttony, what is gluttony about? It's about eating, and eating as much as you can. How can we translate it to our IT environment? How we can translate it to our projects? I would say using tools. As many as we can, right? There's new fancy framework, let's add it to the project. There's new, continuous integration environment. Let's do it. There's new monitoring tool. Let's do it. Let's put everything. Why? I don't know. Increase complexity. Yeah. CV will look perfect. So we like to put many, many things into our projects. But there's even a worse case. When we have so many tools in our project, but we haven't still solved our problems, what we do? We have a better idea, right? Better idea, Dustin has better idea. I will craft my own tools because I'm solving problems that no one ever solved in the world. So we are starting to craft all tools. And I'm going to conferences quite often. And at every conference, I hear, don't build your own tools. Reuse the stuff that's already there. And what we do in our organizations? We build our own tools all the time. Raise your hand if you have not been working on some internal framework, internal tool, you haven't been doing this. Raise your hand if not. Yeah, I don't see any hands. We've all been doing this. I was writing a framework for performance testing. I was writing a framework, like some common libraries. We are doing this all the time. So this is actually quite fun, no? When you're building your own tool, especially when you're starting, you have this motivation, right? There's the fire because we are solving something that no one ever solved. It's a new project, it's greenfield, we have this fire, we have this motivation, right? And, as you are solving some world problems that no one ever solved, you feel like a little bit like Elon Musk. And combining this fire and the Elon Musk attitude, you can see these people who are starting to work on their own frameworks at the corridors in your office because they look like unicorns, yeah? They're wind in their hair, they're flowing through the corridors. But unfortunately, then comes the reality, right? And it turns out that this problem wasn't solved because it's super trivial and no one thought about it. Usually it's pretty complex, and when other teams, other people start to use your software, there are so many edge cases and so many things they ask for. It's not getting that cool anymore. So the motivation goes down. And if you have so many own tools, it turns out the complexity in your project, the number of different tools you're using is so big that if you want to add a new person to your project, it actually turns out he has to spend 6 months just learning your own tools. You probably have seen those job advertisements. You have like, we require this, this, and that. And for the first time, you see those names, right? Because it's their internal stuff. I remember once I was working in the company, and I saw the job advertisement for my project. And there was the technology we created internally. And it was in required ones. So you first have to come to our office, learn it, and then you can apply for a job. Okay, but having all this complexity, the motivations go down, then these unicorns happen to end up as, I said, ponies. And why this happens, why we keep building our tools, and while we always stick to them. And the answer is here. It should help, the picture should help you. This is the IKEA here in Bronowice in Kraków. And I want to talk about the IKEA effect, a psychological effect that is actually based or thanks to the IKEA brand. Because if you look at IKEA, what do you think about their products? Well, they are not some superb quality, right? They are not the cheapest one. And you have to build them on your own at home, so you have to do the extra work. But still, they are one of the top furniture sellers in the world. Why this happens? Well, the answer is in this third part, because you have to build them on your own. And this is the IKEA effect. IKEA effect says that we put greater value in our own creations, right? If you buy a chair in IKEA, you bring it home, you put it together, it's a little bit crooked, right? It's not that comfortable, but it's yours. Huh? You're the man in the house. Like thousands of years ago, this was like hunting a mammoth with your bare hands, with a spear. Now we build the chair. The same pride. So this is the IKEA effect. We build something, and even though it's not perfect, we cannot assess its real value because we put greater value. Our brain works like this. We put greater value into our own creations. So the learning from this chapter is that more is not better. Definitely not in terms of tools, of frameworks, processes, and so on, because you increase the complexity in your project. More is not better, and your tool may not be the best one. You may think it's very good, you may think it's the best, but remember that you may not be objective about it. You may put a greater value because you build it. So, chapter number 5 was done. Chapter number 6, wrath, anger. Who can we meet in here? Someone with really, really big anger management issues. Any ideas? He was getting so angry that he was getting green from this anger. Here we meet the Hulk. So Hulk appears, smash. What can we learn from that guy? Like, smashing is not very productive at all. So what can we meet from this guy? What can we learn, from this guy? Well, and it was a question that I asked myself because this part was really hard. First, I started to think about what anger is actually, because it was really hard to think about the behaviors in our work that are caused by anger and how to somehow connect it with some psychological aspects. So I started to read about anger, and what I've read is that anger is a natural emotion protecting us. Well, protecting us from what? Protecting us from things we consider wrong. So if there is something we feel is wrong for us, we get angry. And I started to think about myself. I'm emotional kind of guy, yeah? I get happy 50 times a day, I get sad 50 times a day, I get angry. It's just the way I am. But I thought about it, and it's not like I'm, coming to the office at 9 and I'm starting being angry. Until 5 p.m. I'm angry and I go home. Oh, it's usually I'm getting angry because of something. Something happened, so decision was taken. We had some incident on production, and I got angry. And looking especially at the decisions, some things that happened, I started to read about something that is called deflection to the result. What is deflection to the result? Deflection to the result is another psychological effect that happens in our heads. And deflection to the result says that we, as human beings, we tend to focus on the result only, ignoring all the context. We get angry because something happened, but we don't see the entire context of this. We don't see the path that led to this decision, and so on and so on. To give you an example again, so you can easily, understand that, what the deflection to the result is. Imagine you see a guy on the street with a brand new iPhone. Okay? And for this example, let's assume that iPhone is actually a good phone. Okay? For a moment. So you see a guy on the street with a brand new iPhone. It's really expensive, but it's really good. So what do you think? Well, yeah, he made a good decision. He bought an iPhone. Yeah, he spent a lot of money, but is this a good phone? So it was a good decision. Cool. But you have no idea if hadn't taken a loan for that or haven't sold his kidney to buy this phone. If you knew that this guy, for example, sold his kidney to buy an iPhone, you would say that he's stupid and this decision was really wrong. But you look at this and you see the result. You see a guy having an iPhone in his hand and you don't think about the context of this decision. This is deflection to the result. When something happens, we have some result, we look only at that. If the result is good, like in the office, some decision was taken, if you like this decision, then you're happy, yeah? Everything's cool, everything's perfect, world is beautiful place. If you don't agree with this decision, you feel that this is not the right decision, it's wrong, you get angry, right? Here's my resignation, I quit, thank you very much. That's it. And the problem here is that if you're doing only this, and this is caused by deflection to the result, this is our natural mode of thinking, you ignore the context, you ignore this entire path that led to this particular result. And the problem is that you ignore all the learning that you can have, because you won't learn anything from the result only. The only place where learning actually happens is this path. So, the learning from this chapter is that your judgment may not be based on full information. Because we as human beings, we don't naturally tend to look for broader picture. We don't tend to look for context, for the full information. Chapter number 6 done. Chapter number 7, sloth, laziness. Again, who can we meet in here? A very good example of someone being totally lazy. Any ideas? Garfield is a good example, but no, sorry. As you can see, I have some of my favorite cartoons and so on. So we go back to classics, so Simpsons again. So we meet the one and only Homer Simpson. who is actually sleeping at the moment, so let's leave him. So what can we learn in here? First, I wanted to share with you a quote. I won't ask you who said that, but as you can see, it's obviously one of the Homer Simpson's quotes, the wise ones. So, trying is the first step towards failure. Sounds funny, right? But actually, if you look at this sentence, it's kind of true, right? Well, trying is the first step towards failure. Well, if you don't try stuff, you won't fail. Simple as that. So if you want to avoid failures, then stop trying. Smart. But actually the problem is that if you don't try, yeah, you won't fail, but you also won't succeed. And we are unfortunately in an industry where you cannot afford not to try, when you cannot afford not to learn, not to succeed. The industry is changing so fast, the business is changing so fast, technology is changing so fast that you have to try new things. And yes, sometimes there will be failures, but sometimes there will be successes, and this is important. And here our brain, again, tries to stop us, because let's have a junction ahead of our main character. So Dustin stands in front of a junction, and he needs to choose his way. So one way is the old one. This is a way he traveled hundreds of times. And there's a new way that he doesn't know at all. Which one will he choose? Sorry? You're brave. Possibly, but the thing is that our brain will choose the old one. Our brain will say, I choose the old way because I know it well. And this in psychology is called a well-traveled road effect. You know, for thousands, hundreds, thousands of years, our brain had one task: to keep us alive, to keep us as a species, to continue our life. This was the only task. Our brain was there so we can survive, so we can, pass our genes to next generations and so on and so on. So the strategy that our brain developed was fairly simple. It was play it safe, right? If something is new, if something is not known, if something seems like, I don't know that, our brain tells us by default, don't do it, right? There are some, if you stand in front of, some kind of hole, it's like, don't jump there. Where we don't see any more people jumping from a cliff, for example. Yeah. Or, fighting with the lion. Because if brain told them, okay, it's a very good idea to go there and fight the lion, they are not here anymore, and we are here. So our brain developed this strategy, play it safe, and it worked. And it works still today, because our brain is not changing that fast. So the strategy that was working for thousands of years is still here in our heads. So our brain naturally tells us, if there's a choice, if there's something new and something go safe. Don't do any risks, don't take any risks. It's our default mode. We are afraid of change by default, because it worked for hundreds of thousands of years and kept us alive. And unfortunately, in our work, it works the same. If there's some risk to be taken, some new decision, some new idea, our brain will tell us, let's play it safe. This is how we work. So the learning in here is, 100 times you can go the same way and it will be okay, but there will be this 101st time where the road turns to be a dead end and you crash, right? So the learning here is that using the same way all the time may give you no results. So, the chapter 7 is done. We are through all 7 deadly sins. So time for chapter number 8, the grand finale. Let's admit it, guys, right? We sinned. We are professionals, we are adults, but yeah, we sinned. And don't be afraid to, say it aloud. Don't be afraid to confess, because all that happens here stays between us and goes on YouTube, but no worries. So we can confess, right? We sinned. Because, come on, guys, haven't you had this Sheldon Cooper moments when you were sitting at the meeting, there was a decision to be made, and you were like, let's just do it my way. I know how it's done. Let's just do it like that. Stop discussing. Or this Homer Simpson moments when you say come on, guys, let's just do it like we've always do it and go home. This is simple. Let's not try to build something new. Let's just use the same stuff. It always worked. We had this moment. We all had these moments. So, I sinned, you sinned, and Dustin sinned as well. And when you sin, where you go? You go to hell. So Dustin goes to hell. And who's in hell? The devil, obviously. So the devil is in hell, and the devil says, ha ha ha, welcome to hell, you sinner. You sinned, so it's now time for your punishment. But as we talked about this, these are some psychological cognitive biases. This is something that happens subconsciously. All these behaviors we discussed are caused by our subconsciousness. And we are not aware of it. But now when we are aware of it, we know how our brain works, we can actually make a change. Because we know what are the behaviors we do wrong. So maybe now we can change this behavior to do something better. But look, first, in the very first chapter, we met Sheldon Cooper. Sheldon Cooper, who was crazily proud. He was too proud, too confident, too cocky. And this was leading to making decisions based on assumptions, based on opinions. And that was bad because it was leading to bad decisions. So how can we change it? Well, we can be less proud and use some data, and this will be much better. So instead of making decisions on our assumptions, on our our opinions, our experience, our knowledge, we think it's for sure there, well, we can start making data-driven decisions. Then, in the second chapter, we met greedy Mr. Burns, who was taking all the cool stuff for himself, ending up working alone. So, guys, maybe it's time to start working as a team. Because there is more than us in the project. There are our colleagues, our managers, our business, anyone that's there. We can start working as one team. Then in the chapter 3, we met lustful Barney Stinson, who wanted everything. He was mimicking others just to achieve the same results, and it wasn't working because of cooled cargo. So how can we change that? Well, maybe we can start asking ourselves, why? Why we need those things, what we want to achieve. By the way, a great book by Simon Sinek, strongly recommend to read that. So we can start with why. Then, in chapter number 4, we met little, jealous, mean Eric Cartman, who wanted his ideas to be on top. And then every discussion occurred. He wanted his ideas to be implemented, his ideas to be chosen, and he was affected by the confirmation bias. He was looking for people supporting his vision. So how can we change it right now? Well, maybe instead of looking at our ideas, when we have data, we know the why, well, maybe it's time to start measuring things, apply metrics, and start to measure stuff, not fighting for things that are the right ones, because we think so, but because metrics says so. Then, in the chapter 5, we met big boy Peter Griffin, who was eating everything, putting tools into his project and crafting all tools that he was sticking to for a long time because it was his. Right? The IKEA effect. So when we have measurements, we have metrics, we have data, we can finally start to evaluate real value of the things we are using, of the frameworks, tools, processes that we are using. We can start evaluating them and get the real value from them and make a right decision if this is something we need or not. Then we met Angry Hulk, who was smashing everything because of the deflection to the result. He was seeing a result, didn't like it, smash. And it was causing that he was making a judgment not based on full information. So now that we know that our brain works like this, maybe it's time to spend some active time, spend some energy to actually look at the big picture. Not only my piece of project, not only my team, but the bigger picture, so we are aware of what is happening and what we want to achieve as a whole team. And then, in the 7th chapter, we met lazy, sleeping Homer Simpson, who was so lazy, and of course, due to well-traveled road effect, he was always choosing the same solutions, the same way. He wasn't trying new things, and then was bad. And our brain, as I said, is afraid of change. It won't take a risk by default. But if you create a safe environment for it, it will be much better. So having all these things I've mentioned, having data, knowing what you want to achieve, having metrics, being able to evaluate value, seeing big picture, working as a team, so all these things allow you to create a safe environment where you can run a smart, well-defined experiments. You can quickly verify your hypothesis and apply the things that bring actual value to your projects. And now when we have all these 7 good behaviors here, these 7 behaviors, they are very nice, a very solid foundation that you can build on. On these 7 things I mentioned, and I will tell them once again. Data-driven decision, working as a team, starting with why, measuring everything, evaluating real value, seeing the big picture, and running smart experiments. Those are foundations that allow you to create something which I like to call this craftsmanship culture in your team, where you can actually use your craft, verify your ideas very quickly, and grow yourself as craftsmen. So if you have it in your team, you can also then later, if it's possible, if you have the energy, you have the power, you want to do it, and strongly recommend it, you can do it bottom up, and you can try to move this craftsmanship culture not only be in your team, but actually move it to have it in your entire organization. And this is something which I really wish you, because if you are in the organization that has craftsmanship, software craftsmanship as in its heart, you won't have these problems you very often have. You won't be asking yourself, can we use this framework, or will we get the approval to do this, or we'll be able to try this new stuff, or if anyone will allow us to spend some time investigating this stuff? No, because you'll be able to run a smart experiments, you will see the big picture, you will verify your ideas quickly, and be able to prove your value and value of your ideas to the business. So there won't be any questions, should we do that, should we not do that, because you will have this trust from the other side that you can do all you want because you are craftsmen. You know what you do and you see the value you're bringing. So having this craftsmanship culture in your organization is great, and organizations that have this at their heart are a great place to work at as software developers. So I wish you that very, very much. Thank you. That's it from my side. Thank you very much. I guess if you have any questions, there was time for questions, but I don't know if you have a mic. If you have any questions, just shout or come to me. So, any question? Yes.
At what company do you work?
As I said at the very beginning, I run my own company. And here today, I'm representing myself.
Are you recruiting?
To my company? If you're a trainer, yes. Any more questions? If not, you can catch me here for the next few minutes. Happy to answer audio questions or discuss. And you're free. Thank you very much once again.